Okay. Can everybody see what is the opening page of a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Excellent. So again, before we get started, first and foremost, we honestly want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. Definitely appreciated. Definitely think that we'll be able to get some good conversation going today and make this plan the best possible plan that it can be. A couple housekeeping items. Again, this session is being recorded. A sign language interpreter has been provided. It is Erin Stumpf. If you sort of hover over her screen, you can pin her. It's on the left-hand side of her block, and that'll pin her so that you can see the sign language interpreter during the presentation. There is also an option for captioning. If anybody who would like captioning, they can get to that by on the bottom of the screen. On the right-hand side, there's an option for turn on captioning. This is very much intended to be a question and answer session. So do not feel like you need to wait till the end of this presentation to ask questions. We do ask if you can wait till the end of a slide to ask a question. We will be taking a break after every slide to give the opportunity for questions. As you came in, you are most likely muted. So if you'd like to ask questions, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask away. There is also a chat box, and Mike Bush will be monitoring the chat box throughout the entire meeting. So if you would like to submit a question that way, that is also fantastic. If the question is more appropriate for a later part of the session, we may hold on to a little bit for the question, but we will answer every question today. Finally, this presentation is available for download. If anybody in your organization or anybody in your neighborhood would like a copy of it, please email out to us. Our email is at the end of the presentation, and we will certainly get that out to you. It might take us a couple days to get it together, but we'll certainly get it out to everyone. With that, before we get going, does anybody have any questions or anything technology-wise before we sort of jump into this? Not hearing anything? Eric, I will hand it over to you.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Bothy. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I'm Eric Bothy. I'm the project manager with the Board of Public Service here. And I am here with David Newberger, the Commissioner on the Office of the Disabled. And also here with Andrew Lackey, Deputy Commissioner. And you already heard Travis Helmkamp, who is the project manager with Oates and Associates. And then there's Mike Bush and Jim DeYoung with National ADA Consultant. And we also have, who are not with us today, Gina Hilberry, who is with Cohen Hilberry Architects, and Sean Martin with M3 Engineering as sub-consultants. Did I miss a slide?
Yeah, if you want to go over sort of the presentation outline.
Right. So the presentation outline, I already did the team overview. We're going to talk about why we prepare an ADA transition plan. That'll be gone over by David Newberger. And he'll talk about also ongoing city efforts. And then we'll hand it over to the Oates consulting team for current city self-evaluation efforts and community engagement. And now I'm going to hand it over to David Newberger for why prepare an ADA transition plan.
Thanks, Eric and Travis and everybody. We appreciate your being here. I'll go through the technicality in a minute, but what I hope everybody will think about is that as we do projects like this, we are required by the federal government, and we would want to do it, to have citizen input into this process. So this is one of the mechanisms that we are both seeking input from you and your organizations, but also from your public. And at the end of this, there's going to be discussion about a survey of various kinds of barriers that people can tell us about and rank and so forth. So under the ADA, it was passed in 1990. At that time, all state and local governments were supposed to have evaluated all of their barriers to access. That's called a self-evaluation. And then they were supposed to create a plan about how they were going to eliminate all of those barriers. And incidentally, that plan was supposed to be done by 1992. The reality is that I don't know of any city that seriously accomplished that because it is a very major effort for all of us. One of the ways that I mentioned that in my own head is that we have 2,000 miles of sidewalk. And it's something that needs to be worked out. They need to be accessible, but that these are big projects. ADA required that organizations that have more than 50 employees have this written transition plan that we're aiming towards, and we are covered by what's called Title II of the ADA. Now, one of the features of Title II of the ADA is that we have to have both our physical facilities be accessible and our programs be accessible, so that it is not just, we're not just looking at architectural and engineering issues, but they obviously play a big part in this discussion. So what we're looking at is the city's assets and going through a process of trying to figure out what we should work on. And then we are also in the process of setting priorities for what we're going to do, which is transition. And we are not going to finish the entire evaluation before we start working on stuff. We've already been working on stuff, and we continue to go forward. So if I could have the next slide. What we do get out of this, which is unique for us, is that we get to consolidate all of our efforts into a single place, and that we can build coordination from all of our departments. And we can come to agreements, of which in the city departments there are various opinions about what standards should be followed, and the law, in my view, is fairly consistent. But in any event, in the document that Travis and Mike from OITS will give us, will eventually specify standards that we should be doing. And then all of this hopefully will launch us to move forward with actually spending money on plans. Okay. And then one of the things that I want you to know is that we've done a lot of stuff already in the city. We don't, by and large, there are mistakes, but by and large, we don't build curb ramps that don't comply with standards. By and large, we try to make sure that we're accommodating all the citizens in an effective way. Just as some examples and things that we had to introduce is that our water bills are now in a format for people who are blind or low vision. And that would be true of other offices too. The city, as you may know, you probably do, has all those signs in front of people's houses that give them dedicated parking spaces. There are more than 2,000 of those permits out there. They are for people who don't have off-street parking, and they can only be placed in front of a residence. But if anybody's interested in those, you should contact this office. We also have a situation in which the city is able to give reduced pricing for elderly and disabled people for bus transit. And one of the things that we've done over the years is made sure we had deaf interpreters at those sessions when the passes are being distributed, so that our deaf friends can deal in a big crowd and are able to participate. Our St. Louis Area Agency on Aging does a lot of Meals on Wheels and congregate food. They also actually can provide some transportation for people who are disabled and elderly. Obviously, we attempt to, in some ways, we're separate from the Public Housing Authority, but there are things that we can do about housing that we do. For example, the Affordable Housing Commission for several years now has attempted to make loans to people, to support people, and make sure that the designs are fully accessible for folks when they come out of that. Quite frankly, people weren't thinking about the accessibility standards in the building codes when I came along, but now everybody is up and thinking about that, and we're trying to make sure everything is done by code. Go ahead and turn to the next slide. And in a way, this, I've already said it, but the fact is that we've done a lot of physical work as well as a lot of programmatic work, and we keep doing it. And hopefully one of the benefits of this plan that's being written is that we'll have a record of all the work that we've done, and we will then be able to have a better, clearer idea of where to go. But some of you maybe have been in the parks. We've done a lot of work in making the restrooms in the parks accessible. We've done, when we've taken over buildings, we've made sure that they were accessible. There's work to be done yet in other buildings. City Hall now has some more accessible restrooms, but not all of them. And we're going where we can go. So with that, I think I'm done. Is that right?
Yes. We'll take a little break here. If anybody has any questions, this is a good time to jump in with any questions. Not hearing any, I will hand it over to Jim to talk about the next slide.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you, David, as well.
Yeah.
Did someone have a question? Okay. The current city self-evaluation efforts too are very important, that we look at the transition plan as it covers, and the self-evaluation as it covers all aspects of the city government. The ADA transition plan covers all these aspects and also puts in place solutions to creating accessibility. One of the things we wanted to do too is recognizing the great work that had been done in the past by David and others, is to consolidate all the past ADA efforts as well as develop new guiding documents so that future efforts done by the city would be able to follow one single code for accessibility, and that would incorporate local as well as federal and state code into one code, so that it would be predominant for everybody to follow throughout the city. Next slide. If we look right now, the partial, we've so far been able to do a partial self-evaluation of the city programs, activities, and services, which is covered under the ADA, the Title II entity or city government must be looking at. I think you can respect and understand the breadth of what that would be across all the programs, services, and activities of city government. We have not been able to complete all of that, but what we try to do is take an accurate sampling from various parts of the city as well as the various programs within the city to outline what needs to take place to make them fully accessible and usable by people with disabilities. So that's what's been able to be done in the transition plan, or if you look at it on the physical end of it, which is what the transition plan, I should have stated, the policy is covered under self-evaluation. But under the transition plan, we're looking at the current condition of sidewalks and have done I don't remember how many miles exactly. Travis, perhaps you remember?
We've done about 170 miles so far.
Okay, of sidewalks throughout the city. And one of the things that's very important when we're looking at that is it's not just a matter of is there a curb cut, but we have to be looking at also, are there any breakups in the sidewalk along that path of travel? Is there a slope that is unacceptable that perhaps a person in a wheelchair would not be able to traverse that sidewalk? Or a person, say, who has an ambulatory disability and uses a cane or crutches might find that uneven surface unable to be passable. And so that was very important to look at all that. Looking at the city buildings too, we're looking at accessibility throughout in the various properties. And I think you can respect with the multitude of buildings and the multitude of parks within the city. Again, we're able to take examples to begin this project. So what we're looking at is to identify future improvements, which will focus on the barriers which have been identified, as well as conceptual costs to improve not only the pedestrian network, but also access to all the city buildings, as well as looking at program access for all the programs for the city. So as we pull all that together and then provide a budget and scheduling for completing the remaining assessments to the city, I think folks can understand this is not something that will occur by next week, but this is a lifelong plan, if you will. It's something that will be looked at not only tomorrow, but next year and throughout the following decade.
Jim, can I interrupt for just a minute? I'd like to add a point in there, and that is when we talk about sidewalks, I'm sure many people in this group are familiar with the 50-50 program for improving sidewalks. And the problem with that program is that you don't really get the complete work done for whole blocks. And so one of the issues that we're going to have to deal with the Board of Aldermen is finding a better ways to finance correcting sidewalks so that we can do it on a more consistent and accessible basis.
Well, with the 50-50, this is Joanne Rankins Cannon. I'm a mother of a child with Down syndrome, and I'm also work with the city neighborhood stabilization. With the 50-50 sidewalk program, they do get, if you give them the address, you can make plans to pay that off and not with one lump sum. You only have to pay half, and you can break that payment up into quarters.
Yes, I mean, we have plenty of problems with the 50-50 program because part of that the Board of Aldermen have, but they may not have a budget. They often don't have enough of a budget to deal with it. We also have the problem that really the city is responsible for the trees that pop the sidewalk, for the trees that are in the tree lawns, and we don't have a budget right now to do serious work on correcting that. So there's a lot of sidewalk work that needs to be done.
Any other questions or comments at this particular time? I think at this point I turn it back over to Travis.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. We've spent a lot of time so far talking about how this is going to be a long-term process, but I think sort of one tangible aspect that we're really looking at is sort of as stuff is being built in the city, sort of let's make sure that that stuff is being built compliant and is being built correctly. To that end, that is part of that review of the city policies, is taking a look at sort of do the current city policies and are there changes that we can make to kind of have consistent policies across the various city departments. Ultimately, that all starts with establishing the ADA criteria to determine compliance. You know, what is that criteria that the city is going to use to determine that this is compliant or not compliant? And really sort of one big benefit of that is that it gives us an opportunity to look at post-construction inspections, to really look at sort of what was actually built out in the field and to make sure that what the final product is ultimately what was built. And this applies not only to city projects, but also to developers. By giving them consistent standards and consistent expectations, it's going to lead to the city ultimately getting a better final product for what the developers are building on city right away. Talking a little bit about the pedestrian assets themselves. As Jim previously mentioned, we are only able to survey a portion of those as part of phase 1. But really that portion that we're surveying, we're looking at assessing the sidewalk segments, the curb ramps, as well as the pedestrian traffic signals. As part of the 170 miles that we've already done, we have completed assessments in every single ward in the city, and also really focused on sort of getting representative samples of the broad array of sidewalks that exist throughout the St. Louis. From heavy pedestrian streets such as Grand or other, the downtown area, to really getting into sort of some of the local streets and taking a look at the condition of the sidewalks along those local streets. Ultimately, the reason that we're doing this is because we're looking to develop a way to score this data, to allow the city to identify these are the sidewalk segments that are having the greatest impact on people's ability to get around the city. The way that we're proposing to go about doing this is a two-part scoring system. The first part is what we're calling a citywide priorities map. And we think that this is an opportunity in which you can really help us in that development, in which really what we're looking at is sort of where are people trying to get in the city? When a pedestrian walks somewhere, where are they trying to go, and also where are they starting from? The second part of that scoring system is what we're calling the accessibility score. And really the accessibility score is about assigning a value for each barrier. Ultimately, something's either ADA compliant or not ADA compliant, but what we're really looking to do is identify sort of what is the impact on the end user when it comes to that barrier.
And I think, Travis, if I could interject here, a perfect example of that is what I was speaking about earlier with the slope sidewalk. It's not just the we have to look at the surface of the sidewalk. Is that passable? As well as the slope? Are there curb cuts? As I mentioned, is there a problem with, something's maybe gone wrong with part of that sidewalk, so that the access is not just at the curb, but you can go from one corner to the next corner, if you will, and that links into a path of travel that continues to your ultimate destination.
I think another good example of sort of what we're talking about with the accessibility score is whenever we think about vertical displacements, or sort of those vertical barriers that can exist between slabs of sidewalk. Anything greater than a 1/4 inch, unless it's beveled, is technically considered non-compliant. However, when it comes to usability for people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, even runners who are running down city sidewalks, there's a big difference between a 1/4 inch lip and a 2-inch lip. And that's really what we're sort of looking at, is how to identify, not just that the sidewalk is non-compliant, but that this sidewalk is truly stopping someone from getting to where they need to get to. Going back to the citywide priorities map for a second, really that's based on sort of two different pools of data that we collected. The first pool that we looked at was what we call pedestrian traffic generators. Those are the areas in neighborhoods that we know people are trying to get to. If you do have the PowerPoint up in front of you, if you look over at the right-hand side of your screen, this is Grand, sort of in the Dr. Martin Luther King area of North City. And highlighted on here are some of the different traffic generators that people are trying to get to. A good example of that is the Metro bus routes. One thing that we've heard over and over from especially the disability community is that if I can get access to the bus, I can get access to the rest of the city. So that's sort of one of the key pedestrian traffic generators that we're looking at, is sort of those pedestrian routes along those bus routes. Another good example of pedestrian traffic generators are city buildings, schools, parks, and also especially commercial corridors. Not only is that where people are walking to shop, buy goods and services, but there's also a lot of employment that exists along those corridors as well. The second part of the scoring system that we looked at was socioeconomic data. This was data that we received from the East-West Gateway Council of Governments. And really what we used that data for was to sort of identify parts of the city in which there is a likelihood that people are walking to get to work, to get to goods and services, really just sort of the possibility of increased pedestrian traffic. We looked at a couple different elements when it came to the socioeconomic data. Some examples are percentage with zero car households. Sort of, if it's a neighborhood in which a lot of people don't have access to automobiles, it's fair to assume that those people are walking to get to places. Another component we looked at was population density. You know, an area in which there's a lot of people living in close proximity to each other, that really just increases the likelihood that people are going to be out and about walking. Another key socioeconomic data that we looked at was the percentage of people living with a disability. Looking at studies, people living with disabilities have lower access to automobiles, and also there's an increased sensitivity to those barriers that we talked about. So really, at the end of the day, all this data kind of comes together and allows the city to really start to identify sort of where are the locations in all the different parts of the city that it's reasonable to expect that there's going to be heavy pedestrian traffic, because it connects a large apartment complex to a shopping district. It connects a large housing area to that neighborhood school that the kids are going to. And it really allows us to start to identify sort of how are people traveling throughout the city.
Hey, Travis, we've got 2 questions from the chat, if I could jump in.
Certainly.
Okay, first question. Who is responsible for broken up sidewalk at a driveway? Is it technically a sidewalk or is it the commercial business driveway?
If Eric or I could answer that, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that, well, it's the responsibility of the owner of that property.
Yeah. It's a responsibility of the property owner. This is Joanne with the city.
Oh, there you go.
When we're evaluating driveways, sometimes there's a tendency to make a big slope in them that goes right across where the sidewalk would be. And the technical requirement is that the portion that is sidewalk should be at the same slope as any other sidewalk, which the standard is called 2%, but a very slight slope, enough to get the water off the sidewalk and not tip people over.
All right, very good. One more for now. Is street creep being considered here? I know along Hampton and Chippewa, they have a couple of areas where there is a bus shelter that in times of heavy rain, this becomes a splash zone for those using the sidewalk.
So one thing that we are looking at on this is, number one, the minimum width of the sidewalk. And we're also looking at the terminology we use is space, but pretty much that's the distance between the back of the sidewalk to that sort of face of the sidewalk. The federal government and the city, in following those standards, do have minimum requirements of those widths, with the goal of those widths really being that it provides an opportunity for someone to get as far away from the curb, not only for water and things of that nature, but also just for general safety as well. So that is information that we are cataloging as we go along, and that is going into that accessibility score that we had previously mentioned. Okay, hearing no other questions, we'll move on to the next slide. Again, if anybody has any questions, chat's a good place. Feel free to interrupt. Moving on, we're now going to shift over to the city buildings, properties, and parks. Ultimately, again, we're only able to look at select buildings. We are focusing on sort of those buildings that we know receive a lot of heavy pedestrian traffic. So that includes City Hall, it includes 1520 Market, it includes community centers, the couple of the large city parks. So those are sort of the buildings that we're looking at as part of phase 1. Again, this is a good opportunity of sort of we want to make sure that we're not missing buildings that we know the public uses on a daily basis. So if anybody has any buildings that they can think of that, either they know they have challenges getting into, or that, that the city residents use a lot, we would love to hear from those as well. Ultimately, our evaluation of these buildings, properties, and parks start with how people are arriving at the site. And that goes beyond just automobile traffic and parking in the parking lot, but it also includes if someone is arriving by bus, how do they travel from the bus stop to the city building? If someone is using the public sidewalk to get to the city building, how do they access the city building from that public sidewalk? Is there a dedicated sidewalk that leads them to the city building, or do they have to use the driveway to get there? Because ultimately, the first step in sort of providing those accommodations is being able to get inside the building itself. Once we have taken a look at the site, the next item that we look at is really digging into sort of the programs and services that are offered at each city building. Looking at where they are at in the city building. Whenever someone from the public comes, where are they trying to get to? When there's an employee for the city, how do they get to the restroom? Sort of things of that. And really looking at what are those barriers to access that prevent someone, whether it's an employee of the city or a resident of the city, to get access to those programs and services.
And Travis, this is Jim, if I might add. This is not a construction answer always. It may require some reconstruction or modification to an existing building, but what we're looking for under the ADA is that there be program access. And so what's very critical here is if we have, say, a 2-story building without an elevator and we need to provide access to someone like myself who uses a wheelchair, we can move that program down to the first floor to make it accessible to those who wouldn't be able to gain the second floor. Under the ADA, that would be perfectly acceptable. Or if you had a situation where a person couldn't get to a particular program in one part of the city, you might look at relocating that, or you might look at offering that in a tangent area to that particular area while you're looking to make this citywide accessible. Obviously, as I stated earlier, this is not something that happens overnight, but it's something that will happen, in the decade to come. And in the meantime, you might have to move a program to a more accessible location while modifications are occurring in other locations. So I just want to clarify to all the participants that under the ADA, what you're looking for is access to those programs and services. It's not necessarily a construction answer always, but sometimes can be the movement of the program or a reconfiguration of that program.
Well, and let me just add to that, if I may, Jim. When we're talking about our programs, my office will help make sure that everybody gets access to something, so that we don't have to wait. That's today's stuff. And if, for example, somebody is having trouble getting a audio bill, and they let us know, we would work with that agency. If somebody is holding meetings in buildings that you can't roll into, well, we would be seeking that they change where they put their meetings. And we would have a direct conversation right now. So we want everybody, even though we got all this physical stuff to worry about, we want everybody to be fully involved and have the full opportunity within the community.
Thank you, Travis.
And I think really that's one of our key goals for today, is that you guys, as those neighborhood leaders, know that the Office on the Disabled is ready and certainly willing to assist the residents of the city to get access to things like that. And really, it's not only talking about the ADA transition plan, but also a bit of education on just sort of those programs and services that are available to city residents. Sort of to kind of close up the building part of this, sort of the last key step of this is to prepare city staff to really start to execute, to identify what I'll call low-hanging fruit. of, are there things that can be relocated to provide more accessibility while ultimately we work towards that ultimate goal of complete accessibility. So that these reports that we're doing can be used as guides moving forward to really start to increase accessibility throughout the city. And with that, I will hand it back over to Jim.
Yes, and I think you can all respect and understand now the breadth of the plan that we're trying to put together. And obviously, what we need to do is be aware of what our next steps are here. We've gathered data from the various buildings. We've gathered data from programs and input from the disability community and other important players in the city, as we are doing today with you. And also we're gathering data to look at finalizing a citywide priorities map that we can put together for the city to be able to look at, establish a budget and a schedule to complete that self-evaluation, which really is an ongoing process, as I've indicated, and to identify a potential project to really kickstart the elimination of these barriers and increase accessibility so that citywide people are aware of what we're doing here with the leadership from David's office and Eric's office. We want to put this all together into one neat package as we're moving forward.
And I would just say that it's not just us. I mean, the mayor's office is what's given us the power to do this.
Correct. I failed to include that, and I apologize. So from this point, where do we go? Well, we have an online survey, which you can see listed right there. We encourage anybody and everybody to please input to this. This is a chance for the community to give feedback back to their government, and we're excited by it. Personally, I know the disability community has responded greatly so far, but we want to hear from all aspects of the community, because we recognize, as the ADA did, that disability is not a singular event. It's a family event. And so we want to make sure we get that input. It's a neighborhood event. And so we're very encouraged that you're listening today. We hope you will encourage your communities to take advantage of the survey and provide feedback to us on how residents are using these city facilities. I think it's an exciting time personally for myself being involved, along with David, with the ADA for the past 30 years, that we're now getting great input from the community to be able to put this all together. So please share this with as many people as you can. Take advantage of this survey. And if we need to share it with you in a different format, please let us know. But pass it on to others. There are alternative formats available upon request from David's office, the Office of the Disabled at 622-3686. And there will be future community meetings that we'll be holding. Obviously, with current conditions today, we'll be holding those virtually in the future. But we really appreciate all your time today. We hope you are encouraged by this as we are, as well as the fact that you will distribute this as broadly and widely as you possibly can. So I thank you for your time, and I turn it back to Travis and David and Eric.
As Jim mentioned, there is going to be a future public meeting that will be open to the entirety of the city. We thought that we'd like to do a meeting, sort of a smaller meeting with the leaders of the neighborhoods first, but there is certainly going to be an opportunity for every resident of the city who would like to join us for a meeting. And I think as part of that, we will be sending that out to you guys as well, with the hopes that you can help us to send that information out to your neighborhoods additionally.
And just, if I may repeat what Jim and Travis are saying, that anybody who needs any kind of accommodation in dealing with this survey or anything else, call our office. And the number is, again, 622-3686, and we'll get it worked out, and we'll get you to be able to work with communications that are effective for you.
Okay, and this is Joanne again. I just want to thank everybody on this committee who's done all this work so far. It's been very helpful to me and my daughter, who is 40 years old, has Down syndrome and cerebral palsy.
Thank
Great.
you.
I just want to thank you all for the work that you've been doing. It makes it much more easier for me to get around with her.
Good, and may things only improve.
Yes.
That's really sort of the end of our little presentation today. Again, if at any time you would like to reach out to one of us, there is contact information in this PowerPoint. The email address is ada_stl@stlewis-mo.gov. If you send an email to there, it goes to pretty much everybody who's presenting today. That is one of the best ways to get a hold of us. And if you need anything from the Office on the Disabled, whether it's about the ADA transition plan or anything else involving accommodations and access in the city, please reach out to them. With that, that really is sort of the end of our formal presentation today. And I'd just like to open it up to any questions that we might have. Thank you.
And I know, Travis, we wanted to thank Aaron for doing the sign language interpreting for us.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you very much.
Hey, Travis, I have a question. If someone's doing a developer's doing like a large development project, a commercial mixed use, is there any services that you guys would provide to them in reference to, like, doing an assessment, scoring, or funding, or anything like that?
Maybe I could jump in on that. First of all, and this is a large part where Eric comes from. If they're doing anything in the public right-of-way, the sidewalks, driveways, streets, and so forth, they need a permit to do all of that construction. And we look at that permitting process to make sure that they are complying with the relevant ADA standards. When people do projects internally, we have done, the building division issues building codes. The building codes have accessibility standards in them. The architects are supposed to know what they're doing. But there are many occasions in larger projects where people from this office and lots of people from disabilities have had a chance to make suggestions to designers, and we keep trying to do that. Now, it's not always true that the developers are interested in that, because there's very much a slicing dimes kind of view of the world. But to the extent that we can get their attention, we're here to help.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tina Siebert with the Southampton Neighborhood Association. Would someone be available to maybe talk at one of our neighborhood association meetings so that we can kind of just talk about what you guys provide from the city to our residents? I mean, is that something that you guys would be able to do?
Yes. It might be the Oates team, or it might be my office, but we'll be delighted to do it.
Or it might be both.
Or it might be both.
Yeah, and if you would like to reach out to that ADA_STL, we can have further conversations on sort of who makes the most sense to talk. But yeah, certainly all of us are willing to take part in any conversation that sort of helps to promote accessibility in the city. So yes, please reach out to us.
This is Judy Redlick, and I'd like to talk about the pedestrian signals, the audible pedestrian signals. Who determines where they go? I've got some ideas for some new ones. Is that part of the survey, or should we just call you all about that? And also the cut curb, like the northeast corner at Hampton and Chippewa, the cut curb is really not ADA compliant for blind people, because if you cross at the wrong angle, you could possibly run into ongoing traffic. So how is that some of the things that you want us to put in our survey?
Those are
Yes.
things to put in the survey, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's exactly an example of where people are aware of a particular problem And, the citizens are telling the city, we need to solve the problem there. And that enhances our ability to prioritize those issues. So certainly, if everybody has these things they want to tell us about, please do. I hate to say it, but I think Eric and I are both familiar with that intersection and what a problem it is, but we're really need to get it fixed, and it is a difficulty.
Also, I wanted to thank you all for putting the four-way stop at Weary and Delore. That is so much appreciated for those of us who use guide dogs and canes.
Okay.
And if I might add, Judy, this is Jim DeYoung, that also, when you were mentioning the APS, there are, as we look to bring one standard together for the city to be using, there are suggestions as to what that should be within those standards.
Okay.
But we take the view that Proag requires APS, not chirping birds or no signal at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Great. Thank you.
David, correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but I think, in addition to the survey, you can always reach out to the city as well. Like,
Absolutely. It's expressed in terms of grievances under the law, but I almost don't look at it that way. Give us a problem and we'll do the best we can to work on it.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, this is Miguel and Carla Alexander with the Jeff Vanderloo Association. We just want to thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this meeting. We did get some feedback from some of the residents that are in power chairs here in the neighborhood and our school and our senior center. The resident, she travels from our neighborhood directly up there on Martin Luther King and Grand in her power chair, and she did comment on that she doesn't have any problems, from that, for that travel back and forth to her house. There were no complaints with some of our senior residents that stay in the senior facilities in the neighborhood. And then our school that's in the neighborhood, the gentleman that was talking about relocating, I think that's one of the solutions that the St. Louis Public Schools, they have relocating, like if they have a child in a wheelchair that, is in need of such services, they just relocate them to another school. So that pretty much will take care of that. But I do have a question about the survey and the timeline on everything. Is there a time period that you want all the feedback, from the neighborhood in order to do that, the citywide priority mapping or anything else? Is there a cutoff time?
I think we probably be doing sort of an initial assessment, probably the middle of December. So if we can get it back in the next month, that'd be fantastic. But really sort of the intention of that citywide priorities map is that it is constantly evolving. So I think even going on, beyond sort of the next month or two, feedback is always welcome because the city's constantly changing. I think a really good example of this is NGA. So 5 years ago, that would not be a pedestrian traffic generator or a priority. Now that's changed as that development comes in. So as the way that this plan is being designed is that the citywide priority map is not a static map, but instead is one that is going to be consistently updated as the city continues to evolve. So with that in mind, I think feedback is always welcome. But if we could get sort of that immediate feedback back in the next month, that would really help us with sort of this initial citywide priority map.
Okay, thank you. We will let the community know. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
But we are a permanent open door. If somebody needs to talk about a problem, please talk to my office.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there any more questions?
Nothing else on the chat.
Okay, seeing no more questions from the chat, we will kind of wrap this meeting up. Again, thank you very much for taking your time. It is definitely appreciated. If you need anything from us, please reach out to us. We are here to help. Again, if any neighborhood association thinks that it would be helpful for someone in the city to talk to them, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Pass the survey on to as many people as possible. The more input we get, the better this plan is going to be. And again, thank you very much for your time. And with that, I think that is the official end of this meeting. If nobody else has anything to add.
Thank you.
Very much.
Okay, thank you very much and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.